days. I can handle about 2 to 3 days. Then you get me another day, and that's about my limit. Go ahead and open up your Bibles to Matthew 27. Matthew 27 is where we're going to be at this morning. We're going to finish up this chapter. Hopefully, in that way, we'll have Wednesday night set up for Tyler and ready to go there for it. What did we learn about on Wednesday night? What did Adam cover for us? Who knows? That's right. If you paid attention to Adam, what did you learn? Who did? Yeah, I got, when, how, right? Got a few more to go. What did we talk about? The choices people made, yeah. And then ultimately it resulted in what? Jesus is being crucified. Yeah, we covered that. Thank you very much, Adam, for covering that. I know that's a lot to get through in, 40, 45 minutes. And we kind of, focused mainly on just the facts of the crucifixion, right? And I think it's a very good way to look at it. What it is, what is going on, the choices people made, what it means to us today, what it meant to them. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to pick up a little bit of Jesus' death, and then we're going to cover the signs and things going on around his death, his burial, the sealing of the tomb, and things like that. Before we begin, though, let's go ahead and let's go to God in prayer real fast. Our Holy Father in heaven, we come to you this morning, dear Lord, just thanking you so much for getting everybody here safely in this weather. We ask, dear Father, that you would just be with us now as we prepare our hearts and our minds to study your word, that you would help us to do so, dear Lord, and with honesty and with openness, and that you would help us, dear God, to just take the things that we learn here to not only apply it to our lives, dear God, but to go out into the world and to tell others about you and your Son. We just thank you again, dear Father, always for your Son, Jesus. We thank you for his sacrifice and his death that we have been speaking about, and we just ask, dear Father, that you would help us never to lose sight of that and always keep that in the forefront of our minds and our lives every day. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. All right, so as we're going to go along here, we're going to start back up a little bit. We're going to start in actually verse 45, just to kind of reset the scene for us. So if somebody wants to go ahead and read Matthew 45 through 56. Matthew 27, verses 45 through 56 for us. Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. Okay, backing up there to verse 45 there. We see, right, there's darkness from noon to 3 in the afternoon, second watch into the third watch, depending on your translation. And then Jesus quotes something here. What does he say? You can read the English version of your verse there. What does he say there in verse 46? My God, why have you forsaken me? And we talked about this a little bit Wednesday night. I want to dig into it just a little bit more here for a minute. Mainly because when you start studying things, you come across things, you're like, ooh, I want to point this out because I never knew this. When Jesus says that, what is he doing there? He's taking on the sins he's quoting Psalms 22, right? That there is, he's actually quoting the Old Testament, okay? So go ahead and turn over to Psalms 22. We're going to look at that there for a minute. I think it's important for us to realize some things about this, right? If you notice during the crucifixion, right, we have, if you've listened to sermons, 7 different sayings that Jesus says when you take all the Gospels while he's on the cross. And yet, this is the only one Matthew records. Matthew only records this one. Why do you think Matthew would only record the one where Jesus is quoting Psalm 22? What do you think? Perfect, we're done. Good job. No. Yeah, exactly right. Who is Matthew writing to? Jews, right? And as we're trying to be doing in this class, right, it's looking at this from the Jewish perspective, if either you're there sitting at Jesus' feet or at the moment here at the cross, or if you are later a Jew and you're reading this, and you're seeing that, right? If you read, my God, why have you forsaken me?" that should trigger those around the cross, like the scribes and the Pharisees. They should easily recognize that. Those reading it will probably recognize that. Even as we see the women at the cross probably recognize what he's saying too. Back then, did they have like a psalm book? And if you wanted to quote a psalm, you'd be like, "Everybody turn to Psalm 22. We're going to sing that real quick." No, how do you get somebody to recognize a song without actually telling them what number you're doing? You quote it. Right? If I quote you a line, if I say the sun will come out tomorrow, how many of you probably just rolled your eyes because you're like, "Oh, I hate that song." Right? Yeah, right. Earworm. Now it's going to be in your head. Congratulations. But you know what I say when I just say that, right? And as a scribe, as a Pharisee, standing around that cross, as a Jewish person standing around the cross, you hear, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus on the cross is doing what he's done the whole time with them. Every time he talks to the leaders, what does he do? Where is he usually quoting from when he's arguing with them? The Old Testament, right? Either the Old Law, the Torah, the Psalms, right? He is quoting these things back to them. So I want to take a moment and look at Psalm 22 for a minute. If somebody could read Psalm 22 in verse 1. Thank you. Right. So there, very, very first verse is what? It's not like he's even jumping into the middle of the psalm. The very first verse that David writes here is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far and away from my deliverance?" If you then skip down to verses 7 and 8, it says, "Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and shake their heads. He relies on the Lord. Let him save him. Let the Lord rescue him, since he takes pleasure in him." Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it should, right? This whole psalm that David's writing, David is writing this about his life, and yet with the help of the Holy Spirit, he is prophesying about what else is going to happen. Go down to verses 22 through 31. I'll read that real quick. Psalm 22, starting in verse 22. At the end of the psalm, David says this. He says, "You answered me. I will proclaim your name to my brothers and sisters. I will praise you in the assembly. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. And all you descendants of Israel, revere him. For he has not despised or abhorred the torment of the oppressed. He did not hide his face from him, but he listened when he cried to him for help. I will give you praise in the great assembly because of you. I will fulfill my vows before those who fear you. The humble will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. At the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before you. For kingship belongs to the Lord. He rules the nations. All who prosper on earth will eat and bow down. All those who go down to the dust will kneel before him, even those who cannot preserve his life. Their descendants will serve him. The next generation will be told about the Lord. They will come and declare his righteousness. To a people yet to be born, they will declare what he has done. When you read that, what kind of thoughts come across your mind? What do you think that is? David starts off with, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me? They're mocking me. Tim? Victory, right? David ends this of, I've pleaded with you. You've forsaken me, and yet I continue to plead. They surround me, and then he ends it, but you answered me. And because you answered me, I now have victory. I now have rule. I now have salvation. And so when Jesus is hanging there on the cross and says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right? There's a lot of reasons for that. But to the Jewish person, that is saying, Jesus is telling them, I'm going to win. You may think in this moment, you got me because I'm dying. And after you see after that, it says, he yells and gives up the ghost. I'm going to die. But remember, I'm going to win. Any other thoughts about this before we move on? About Psalm 22, about Matthew. Yeah. Yeah, and you look at Matthew 20, all of Psalm 22, it is all David's pouring out his life before God, but he's also, with the hope of the Spirit and God, telling everybody, this is what's going to happen. And then Jesus uses that, like he always does, as a moment to draw everybody back. This is, again, almost telling them like, you think you've won. You think, oh, we're getting our way. But again, God is taking the evil that you're doing and still going to give victory through it. Yes. Derek, and then... Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, and thing Adam's been telling us, right, is we have this perspective of, we know the whole story, right? We know the Old Testament, we know the New, we know what happens after this, and we like to say, well, how could they not? How could they? Well, again, if you're standing there at the cross, and all of a sudden Jesus quotes Psalm 22, a song you know, and you're like, wait a second. It will then cause you to start either thinking about it or go to a rabbi and be like, hey, tell me what Psalm 22 says, because I know that line from somewhere. And then it all of a sudden starts connecting pieces for you and moving along. Yes. Wendell, did you have a comment?
I just want to say verse 18, there where it says, they divided my garments.
Yep.
That's in this psalm.
Yeah.
So these prophecies pinpoint the things that happened there at the cross.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That passage is littered with it. Yes. Wendell? Yeah. Yeah. And it shows that, right? It also shows, just as David, right? Everybody knows who David is in Israel, just as he has suffered, I'm suffering too. Yes, very good point. Any other thoughts? All right. Yep, Tim, and then we'll move on. Yeah. Unless you're making a point, yeah. Yep. All right. So Jesus gives up the ghost. And in verse 51, what's your first word there in verse 51? Again, right, these didn't have verses, but what does it say there? And does anybody have, if you have the CSB, what's your first word? My first word is suddenly. Does anybody else have a word like that? Then, behold, and behold, right? As soon as he dies, right? This isn't a couple minutes later, a week later. What time did he die, Adam? 3 p.m. What's going on at 3 p.m.? Adam told us this Wednesday night. The sacrifices are starting. The Passover sacrifices are starting. So where are the priests? Where are the majority of the leaders at this moment? The people. Where are they at? They're in the temple celebrating the Passover. And right when Jesus dies, tell me some things that happen. No. So the very first thing we see is suddenly the curtain of the sanctuary, the temple, that separates the holy from the most holy, gets torn. Okay. Somebody explain to me, it's been a year since we've been in Exodus and Leviticus. That's all right. What's the holy and the most holy? Who's in the holy place? Who's in the holy place? The priests are in the holy place. Who is in the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies? God is, and then once a year the high priest can go in, right? So the most holy place is how you access God, right? It's where he dwells. Okay. What separates the two? A curtain, a veil, okay? Depending on what you read, there's different accounts, right? In Exodus, we're told it's 30 by 30, so 30 feet high and 30 feet long. According to the Mishnah, which I had to look up, which is like rabbi oral tradition, they say it was like 60 feet high and 30 feet long. It's a really big curtain. Let's put it that way, right? This is not a one man goes over, to our windows here and, can somebody just get me a ruler real quick and hang it up, right? No, this is dozens, hundreds of people would have to lift this thing and move it. And it's about as thick as, they say, as a palm, so about 6 inches, anywhere between 6 to 8 inches thick. It is a big piece of fabric. You are not accidentally looking around it. You're not accidentally looking inside of it. Because what happens if you do and you're not the high priest and you haven't done all the rites? You die, right? So when God gave the instructions in Exodus of this is how you're going to do this, he made sure you're not accidentally doing it. And then Israelites, as they moved along in the history, really made sure you don't accidentally do this, okay? So that gets torn. How does it get torn, first off? Let me ask you that. Top to bottom. Why do you think Matthew would record top to bottom? And all the Gospels actually say top to bottom. Why do you think they would do that? It's the opposite of what you expect. If you have, we'll even take the conservative estimate. John, how high is the ceiling? 20 feet? Sounds about right. I don't know. I'm a horrible judge of distances. 30. Window says 30. So we'll say 20 to 30 feet. Sure. We'll go with that. Window's short, though. But yeah, we'll go 20 to 30 feet. All right. So imagine you have, if you notice, I didn't do this because there's no way for me to do this. I have a really big, thick curtain that goes all the way up to the ceiling. And I need to immediately tear this right when Jesus dies. How am I going to do that from top to bottom? You would go bottom to top, right? You would probably maybe try to cut the bottom of it and then slowly start to cut your way up and hope eventually you get to a point where you can just start ripping it. To do that top to bottom, what are you going to need? A ladder, a lift. You're going to need something. You're going to need more than just you. So how is it then torn top to bottom? A human didn't do it. God tore it. In Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 and 4, Isaiah has this vision of God in the city, in the temple. And it says he's above the curtain, or he's above the holy seat, and just the hem of his robe fills the whole temple. Right? Just the bottom of his robe fills it all. Telling you just how magnanimous, how big God is, right? And it's letting you know the only way that veil got torn is by God. So why then would God tear the veil that he told them to make? What is he symbolizing? You now, because of my son's sacrifice, have access to me. He is symbolizing you don't need a high priest anymore. You don't need literally the sacrifices that you're giving me right now. You don't need those anymore because my son did it. He was, as Hebrews says, your high priest for once all time. And you now have access to me. You have a new kingdom that he's been preaching this whole time is now here and taking effect, because now a new covenant is coming as you get into Hebrews, things like that. Any other thoughts on the veil? Yeah. You can talk about it for us. Hebrews 10. Yeah.
There, verse 19. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. And since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let's draw near with a true heart, full assurance of faith.
Yep. That's exactly what he did, right? Hebrews is telling you, through his flesh, through that curtain, we now can what? Approach God with what? Confidence. And Jesus is our high priest. Yeah, it's not a, man, when the high priest went in there once a year, I don't know about you, but if I was the high priest, even though if I knew, okay, I followed the law, I did everything right, I probably still wouldn't go through that curtain fully confident, knowing that if I go in there, I'm dead if I did anything wrong. There would still be some apprehension in me as I'm opening up that curtain, being like, all right, here we go. But as we see here in Matthew, you can now just approach him. God is saying, I am here for everybody. Approach me. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Have confidence through my son that he's done everything he can. Everything that is required for you to come to me. There you go. All right. What else happens? So the veil gets torn. What else happens? Oh, yeah.
One more side thing. You mentioned earlier about the time. All when you said there the only sacrifices. Luke reports in chapter 6 of Acts, verse 7, that a great many of those became obedient.
Yeah.
And you were there.
And that's the thing too, right? Is I think a lot of times we look at, when I was, doing research and studying this, you just kind of type in random questions, and as you type in a question, it'll, Google will like, oh, did you mean this question or that question? And one of the questions on there, right, was, what happened to the people around the cross, right? Did they believe? And they mentioned that, right? In Acts and in Luke, you see a great many of those priests that are in the temple, they see the veil, they understood that, right? And then all of a sudden you couple that as you go along here, and it says a great many of them believe. Thank you very much for that. Very good. Any other thoughts? Yep. Yeah. If they have that right heart, that right attitude, that right willingness to obey, right? It doesn't matter unless you do that, yes. Like the centurion, we're going to get there. That's like 3 verses ahead.
I'm impressed with the emotion that I get when I'm right at this point. Just when he dies, and all the things that come true about all the prophecies that we can go back and look at. And when we take the Lord's Supper, I'm thinking about, will
Yeah. Right. Yeah, well, you get to this point and, like Adam said, there is so much here that you could just sit on, for days. And it's very powerful. And it should be in our lives, right? I mean, if we're all being honest, your whole life is dedicated around Matthew 27 and the accounts in Luke and in John. Like, your whole life is based on those things. And it should be powerful to us. All right. So the veil gets torn. What else happens? The earth quakes. Okay. The rocks split. So it's not just like hey, was that a tremor? No, like think California earthquake. It's a big one. This part, I love this part right here. What next happens? Graves open, and they roll back into town. Question. I love this because it blew my mind when I read it a week ago. When did that happen? Look in the verses there. So it says in verse 52, the tombs were open. Many of the body of saints who were fallen asleep were raised. And when did they come out of the tombs? After what? Say it loud. Whose resurrection? Jesus's. For the longest time, for 40, how old am I now? 41 and a half. That's how you know you're old, when all of a sudden you're questioning how old you are. I can't count that high either. For 41 and a half years, I don't know about you, but I've always read this as rocks were split, dead raised, they walked around. That's what happens. But Matthew doesn't tell us that. Matthew says the dead were raised, and when did they start walking around? After Jesus' resurrection. So like Julie said, first off, well, what are they doing for 3 days, right? Or is it just Matthew's just combining that all, right? They were raised, and then after his resurrection, 3 days later. Why is it important that we understand they weren't doing what they were doing till after Jesus' resurrection? Yep. Yeah, they do, right? What is... It could be that, right? It's a witness. Any miracle is a witness, right? What does 1 Corinthians 15 tell us about the resurrection? What's the order of things of first importance? What verse is that? 1 Corinthians 15. Who has to be the first? Jesus. Yeah. We see this though, right? And that's what is happening here. Well, yeah, you can sit there and say, right, he wasn't the first. He was the first under his own power. Yes, Adam. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, you're correct in that. He's not the first person to come back. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When it shows Jesus' foot crushing the head of the Satan. That's what we're witnessing here. He has just demolished Satan in the sense that he's victory. It's a full victory.
Yep. Yeah, it's you killed me because of the sin, because of everything that you brought into this world, but I still have the power on my own to overcome that. And because of my power and because of who I am as God, I now can not only overcome you on my own, but I've paved the way for everybody else to do the same thing. And yeah, what you're seeing here is a witness, right? But a witness not only to those in the city of, hey, yeah, Jesus really is alive because I saw my mother-in-law, but I saw the saints, right? Those who had followed God are up walking around in the city, and they're talking about it, or talking about whatever, I don't know. But also they're witnessing to us of, he's already done this, right? When you read, hey, at the day of judgment, when everything comes crumbling down and God destroys the world, and he's saying, I'm going to come back for you, and the dead are going to be raised first, have confidence in that. Why? Because it's already happened. He's already given you, as we like to say today, a sneak peek of what it's going to be like. On the day he was raised, other people got up and walked into the city too. Yes, Scott. Right. Yeah, very good point. And especially when you read, right, they're up in Jerusalem talking after you, like, you're almost like, dead people are walking around. How did you not hear any of this? Yes, exactly. All right, we got to get moving here. So what happens after that? Who sees all this take place in verse 54? The centurion, okay? We all know what a centurion is. He Jewish or Gentile? Gentile. And again, as we've seen plenty of times in Matthew, who is it that recognizes who Jesus is right away? A Gentile, right? Matthew 16, we have the Gentile woman with her daughter. In Matthew 8, we have another centurion talking about his servant. Matthew, again, is pointing over and over again, this kingdom is not just about you guys. It's not just about the Jewish people. It is about everybody. And again, it's always the Gentiles, it seems, and you're like, how is it always them that recognize almost right away who Jesus is, what he is, right? And the centurion sees all this and goes, he had to be a son of God, right? I've crucified a lot of people. This has never happened before. Any other thoughts on that? Who he was. Yep, exactly. Who else is at the cross there? Women. What women? Right, among them were many women: Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, Mary, the mother of Zebedee's sons, right? And I think, again, it's interesting, and Matthew is kind of setting this all up here, and Tyler's going to knock it home for us on Wednesday, right, is at the beginning of 27 and 26, where are the disciples? What are they doing? The apostles. They scattered, right? And John, we learn at least John is at the cross, right? But Matthew here, he's pointing to who? The women. And again, as a Jewish writer, if you're establishing a physical kingdom and you're talking about the king and kind of the crux of his story right here, are you going to be like, oh, and these women were there? Are you going to write that down if you're trying to convince people? No, because in that culture, right, it's not, I don't know how else to put this, right, a great witness, right? People aren't going to look at that and be like, wow, this is it. I do find it interesting, right, though, that you have Mary Magdalene. Who's Mary, the mother of James and Joseph? Good answer. Right? We don't know, right? Maybe. What most scholars believe is that she's actually mother of James and Joseph, who are well-known disciples when Matthew writes this, right? We've seen this already in Matthew where he said, the father of these two, like, you know who these people are, James and Joseph. How did they get there? Well, their mom was there at the cross as well, right? And then we see the mother of Zebedee's sons is there, which, good on her. She was the one asking Jesus, can they sit on your right and left? And then, yeah, she might be rethinking that a little bit, but she's there. And it just shows you, right, even though Jesus' close inner circle, a lot of them scattered and left and couldn't be there, minus, as far as we know, John. There were people there who were fully dedicated to Jesus all the way, right? It wasn't just we'll pick this up later. No, they were there, they were in it. And we'll see this here in verses 57 through 61, if somebody wants to read that for us. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And you'll see that, right, as you go through Matthew, as you go through all the accounts, right? It's the women who are almost, trying to convince the men of, no, this really happened, right? Like, pay attention. We'll get into that. Yep. All right. If somebody wants to read Matthew 27, verses 57 through 61 for us. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's evening time. Who shows up? Joseph of Arimathea. Have we heard of Joseph of Arimathea before this moment? No, we haven't, right? What do we know about him here in Matthew? He's rich. He has a tomb. What else do we know? He's a what? He's a follower of Jesus. Right? And Luke, we also read he's a part of what council? The Sanhedrin. So he's not only rich, he's what? He's a ruler. He's powerful. Right? And in fact, Luke tells us when they were plotting all this against Jesus and doing this, it says he did not okay this. He was against all this. Right? So this isn't, again, somebody who later on decided, like, this is a disciple of Jesus. How far back we don't know, but at least through the whole trial and crucifixion, he is one. No. hard, yeah. And I think it's interesting. Why would he want it at evening time? Like, why is he so eager to get that down? Because in culture and in Roman times, you just left the body to hang. Like, they didn't care. It's now crow food, right? Again, because it's supposed to be a symbol of, you don't mess with us. You're going to, even after they're dead, we just let it hang. But why would Joseph want to take it down at evening time? What's coming up? The what? The Sabbath, the Passover, right? He can't be unclean, so he's got to get this body down and get it somewhere and get it there quickly, okay? So he puts it into a new tomb. What do you know about Jewish family burial plots? Yeah, they keep reusing it over and over again, right? All right, who's the oldest person here who's mostly dust? All right, we'll put you in this and we'll move you along. Here's the new body, right? Joseph, for whatever reason, he is, one, rich enough to have a new tomb. But then is saying, by putting Jesus in there, what is he saying about Jesus? He's family. Not just I'm a disciple of his, but he's my family. And he deserves the best. And so I'm going to put him in the new tomb. Okay? Any other thoughts here about, and again, who's there in verse 61? Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And I don't know how yours says it. The CSB says they were sitting there facing the tomb. And I mean, there's just certain pictures you get in your head. And just imagine that. They're there at the cross. They see him. They see Joseph come and get him. And we also learn, I think later, it's Nicodemus is there too. Thank you. I was going to say like Nehemiah, and I'm like, it's not Nehemiah. I don't know where I'm at anymore. Nicodemus comes, right, and does this and helps them. And they see him, and they just follow him. Right? They're following him because they know the Passover's coming. They know the Sabbath's coming. They're just following. And you can almost see Joseph like roll the rock, and they're just sitting there staring at it. Raised man soon. Yep, Isaiah 53, yes. Why do you think they're staring at the tomb? Just different. Shock. Yeah, that'd be mainly probably my thinking, right, as shock. Just, okay, right? Like, what do we do now? I think it could also be, right, these women have been very close to Jesus. And what has Jesus been preaching about this whole time? I'm going to rise in 3 days. You're going to destroy the temple. I'm going to rise. The only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah. Then in 3 days, I'm going to be back. It could also be not only just despair, but, okay, he says he's going to do this. And when he's dead, yep. Yep. Yeah. Yep. In his death. Yeah. They're constantly going to follow him. All right. We're going to finish up here. In Matthew 27, let's start in verse 62 here. It says, the next day, which followed the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, Sir, we remember that while this deceiver was still alive, he said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give orders to the tomb he made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come, steal him, and tell the people, he has been raised for the dead. And the last deception will be worse than the first. Take guards, Pilate told them. Go and make it as secure as you know how. They went and secured the tomb by setting a seal on the stone and placing the guards. Okay. What day is this? This is hilarious. What's the next, what day is preparation day? Adam, we'll let you answer this. What's preparation day? The Passover, right? What's the next day then? Passover, okay? Where should not the high priest be, or the priests or the rulers be on Passover? Not at the tomb. Not before who? Pilate. They should not be in the presence of a Gentile. It makes them unclean. What do we know about the rulers and the priests concerning Passover and the Sabbath that Jesus has been railing on them for? They're doing what? Setting up different laws, setting up different things to make sure no one violates this. And yet they're so worried about Jesus that they're willing to just go before a Gentile, make themselves unclean, to tell them what? To tell Pilate what? He said he's going to raise in 3 days. I also find it funny that, they argued with him. He said he's going to destroy the temple. He's going to destroy the temple. And you're thinking, how do they not get this? Obviously, they got it. Because their argument here isn't he's going to rebuild the temple in 3 days. They understood he's going to raise in 3 days. That was his point. So they understood, again, they understood what Jesus was teaching the whole time, because their hearts, because they weren't willing to submit to it, they were just going to hold on to that. So what does Pilate tell them? Do what? Make it as secure as you know how. And it says they placed a seal upon it. What does that mean? If they place a Roman seal, I don't know exactly what it is. But you better not break it, right? Think of like this is a bad analogy, but someone I can come up with. A jar, right? And you've got the little pop seal on top. Why is that pop seal there? To let you know what? It's fresh. It's never been opened, right? If that seal is popped, and the seal's broken, somebody's opened it. That's what they did. They put guards, they put a seal on it. And under Roman law, if that seal was broken, what did that mean for those who broke it? Death. And for the guards too. Yeah, it's not a, hey, if you break this, it's not fresh anymore, please don't. It's not a, hey, please don't open this tomb. It is a, you do this, you die. And why did they want that there? What, again, are they trying to do? What is Satan trying to do? Disavow Jesus, prevent whatever is coming from coming. Yeah, cast anything they can, right? And again, it's funny. They're saying, oh, you need to do this because this is going to happen. And again, it's man trying to look at God and saying either I know better or I can stop you, right? You said you're going to do this. Well, I'm going to put my guards on there. I'm going to seal it up. We're going to make sure nobody touches this thing because we know better and we can stop it. And that's where we're going to stop right now because I don't want to give away Matthew 20. Thank you all very much, and Tyler will pick us up on Wednesday. Right?